Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you I don't know, my name is Joan Gable, and I'm the Dean of the Robert J. Trulesk Senior College of Business, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our Vaughn Executive in Residence Lecture. Go ahead and turn off your cell phone, silence your cell phone, and put them away. And also, please stay until the end. We've built into this set of remarks in particular a very robust Q&A segment, and during that segment I really encourage you to ask follow-up questions as time allows. We are recording, so if you could raise your hand and wait for the mic to come to you so that not only everyone in the audience can hear the question, but it will be preserved on the video so that when people look back it won't just be silence for those few seconds while you're asking the question. So thank you very much for that. Our mission in the Trulesk College of Business is obviously very focused on student preparation. You're why we're here. And we work very hard to give you opportunities to be paired with industry experts so that you can learn about all different ways to pursue your path to success. We really work hard to seek out business partners who have advice for you about their industry, their insights, their own personal journey that will help you as you consider your own future. They really help us and help you hopefully understand where industries are trending, examples of how to turn challenges into opportunities, and we're always very grateful when they stop their very busy days and share their wisdom with us. And today is particularly special because we are hosting our Vaughn Executive in Residence during our celebration not only of Business Week, which I hope you all have enjoyed, but also during our college's centennial year. So this is our Centennial Business Week Vaughn Executive in Residence lecture, and we're very excited about that. So today, we have the pleasure of learning from Kevin Barth, President and Chief Operating Officer for Commerce Bank, Kansas City Region. Mr. Barth oversees product development and policy for Commerce Bankshares' commercial banking operations and is a member of the Commerce Bankshares Executive Committee. He's very active in the business community and currently serves on multiple boards, including the Economic Development Corporation of Kansas City Life Insurance Company, Ogden Power Company, Cereal Food Processors, and Center for Practical Bioethics. We're very pleased to hear from him today, so please join me in welcoming Kevin Barth.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean, and thank you guys for all showing up. I'm sure none of this has to do with you needing any credits, right? I understand this is the last big opportunity to get 15 credits. I'll try to make it worth your time and not be just about the credits. I'm here for 3, maybe 4 reasons today. First of all is I'm very proud of the company I work for and I love what I do. And to find somebody my age that's been doing what they do as long as I have still love it, still passionate about it, is a little bit unusual. But I do. I love what I do. Every day I'm doing something different, and that keeps me energized. I'm also, one of the reasons I agreed to do this, and I don't do this very often, is it was several years ago. It was in a class like this, or a session like this. I actually engaged a banker at the end of a session like this and started talking to him. At that point in my college career, I was thinking about either going into the Secret Service, the FBI, being an entrepreneur, starting a business of my own, or maybe joining the Marines. That's where I was in college, right? And I met with this retired banker, listened to him talk, and after the session, he said, "Tell me about yourself." And he listened to me for a while. He said, "You like business, right?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You like people, right?" I said, "Yes." He said, you're very curious." I said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "Well, if you like business, you don't know what business you want to go into, you got to go into banking." And he said, "Let me tell you why." He said, "Because in banking, your learning curve is going to go like this, from the day you graduate from college till the day you retire." And he said, along with that, and this got my attention, the more knowledge you have, the more you climb that learning curve, the more valuable you're going to be to whoever it is you're working for. And he said, you're going to have friends that are going to go into sales, and their learning curve is going to be like this. And about the time they reach 40 or so, I think it's probably older than that, their learning curve is going to level off like that, and their value is going to level off, and there are going to be other people coming along. They're going to be a lot more valuable to whatever organization they're with than you are. And I thought, okay, that he related it to money, so I sort of got it then. The third reason that I'm here is that again, I'm all about adding talent to our company, and if just one of you, at the end of this or in the next couple of years, if just one of you decides to join our company and end up making a difference and helping us take our company to the next level, then it's been a really good day for me. So I'm also about recruiting. So to start out, I actually had a little focus group a couple weeks ago. I was trying to figure out what I should talk about, and I sat down with a group of our trainees. I'm very, very close to our training program, spent a lot of time with our trainees because that's how I started, was with our training program. And I asked them, what do college students want to hear about now? What do they want to hear about? Do they want to hear about Fed policy? Do they want to hear about the economy, whatever? And they told me, this group, which included 3 MU grads, said, well, they don't want to see PowerPoint presentation. They don't want to hear about Fed policy because they've been talking about that all year, and they've been talking about all these things. They really like to hear about maybe what a banker is, what commercial banking is, a little bit about our company. And then they said most people like to get some tips on how can they be successful. And to the extent I've had any success, how did I generate that success? So that's sort of my plan. I'm going to talk a little bit about Commerce Bank, a little bit what commercial banking is. There's lots of organizations now that have the term bank in their title. I'll talk about commercial banking, talk a little bit about my story, and then I'm going to talk about something I like to talk about. I'm going to relate career enhancers. So hopefully you'll walk away with 7 or 8 career enhancers and that you can use in your journey. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about why banking it's a good place to be right now. And then at the end, Brad King, he is responsible for our training program in Kansas City, and he and I will stay here all night long if you guys want to talk about banking, training programs, just if you want any pointers on how to, anything. You want us to look at a resume? Anybody brought a resume? I'll look at a resume. So that's how we'll end, if that's all right with you. And how much time do I have? 23 minutes? So the dean, I met the dean probably a year ago, and she asked me if I would speak, and so I'll give you some idea what you want to speak about. And a few weeks later, I got this thing back from her. It was a title. It said an unlikely success story. And I thought, holy cow! I didn't know whether to be flattered or insulted, but anyway, so I changed the title. Why banking? Why now? But I am going to give you a little bit of my story as soon as I first tell you a little bit more about Commerce Bank. So Commerce Bank we're the 36th largest bank in the United States. We're a commercial bank. We're primarily focused in the Midwest. We have dual co-headquarters in St. Louis and Kansas City, Missouri. We're actually founded in Kansas City. We're not quite as old as MU, but we've been around for a while. That says 145 years. We're actually, next year, we'll be 150 years old. The average company in the United States is probably less than 25 years old. So for us to be around 150 years old, 150 years, that says that we've learned a little bit. Major pre-tax profits, our profitability really comes from 8 major markets. And then we've developed commercial expertise and developed other offices in some other geographic locations, faster growing markets like Nashville and Dallas. Our company believes that the primary reason we exist as a bank is to help our customers, commercial and retail customers, access the payment system. We love to make loans. It's a lot of fun to make loans. We like helping people grow, but the main reason we exist is to help people access the payment system. The markets, and I'll talk a little bit about what I do, but in addition to being head of commercial bank for our company, I've really been responsible for focusing our efforts growing into Colorado, into Denver, into Oklahoma, down to Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and in the last couple of years have been really aggressive in terms of growing our offices in Dallas to take advantage of those growth markets. Super Community Bank, we refer to ourselves as Super Community Bank, and I'm not going to read all that to you, but what it means is our goal is to have all the products and services of a major money center bank or even an international bank, all the products and services that a company would need or that an individual would need to conduct their banking and to access the payment system, but we want to deliver it locally. And examples of that are one of our very good customers of ours is MU, right? Little old commerce bank in the Midwest, huge organization. You'd think they might have to bank with a bank in New York or Chicago or whatever. We do a lot of business with MU because we are a super community bank. We have the products and services that may be housed in an area in Kansas City or St. Louis, but we have unbelievably sophisticated and experienced bankers here that deliver the services to the college that are actually competing with people coming out of New York or Chicago, but we deliver it locally. This is some of our results in terms of one of the reasons why we achieve superior results. The CBI, that's us, that's Commerce Bank. The blue bar is the largest 100 banks, and this just shows charge-off results. And that really is just going back to September of 2012 compared to our industry. If you go back to 2008, 2009, 2010, when the banking industry and really economy was really in the dumps, the differences in those bars are far greater. So a lot of banking is managing risk, right? And this just shows that when compared to the industry, we do a very good job of managing risk and not losing our depositors' money, because at the end of the day, every loan we make, it's not our money, it's our depositors' money. This shows what I was telling you about earlier in terms of where we make our money. Our peer banks make 67% of their income from net interest income, which is loans and deposits. We make 59% because over there in that light blue and those other colors, that's the payment system, and it's a huge differentiator for us. So when the economy hits rough times and when loan quality gets, loan demand is low or loan quality is poor, we have all these other sources of income that really help differentiate us from our competitors. And then this just shows, going back to 2004, our performance in terms of ROA and ROE compared to our peer banks, the gray bars, and the blue bars is a large bank. So that's banks with over $50 billion in assets. We're about $30 billion in assets right now. And you can see what I was talking about in 2008, 2009, how we compared. We're still really quite profitable. And you saw the large banks, many of them didn't make money. A lot of the money they did make in 2010 and 2011 was actually making or gaining on some of the charge-offs that they had. Most of those banks actually had to have the government help bail them out with TARP money. There were a few that didn't. But you can see, actually in 2011 and 2012, when the industry was still somewhat depressed, those were 2011, 2012 were record earning years for our company. Highest earnings we'd ever had in the history of our company, 2011, 2012, which has really served our shareholders and those of us that work there very, very well. And then at the end of the day, the true test in terms of how we're doing is we are a publicly traded bank. We have one family, the Kemper family, that owns a fairly significant percentage of our stock, but way, 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 way less than half of it. But you can see our shareholders, both inside shareholders and outside, how they compare to the KBW Bank Index and to NASDAQ banks in general. Our shareholders have fared very, very, very well. So that's Commerce Bank. Again, and this is what our trainee said I need to make sure and tell you about, is that I'm a commercial banker. And I still have some retail overall responsibility, but as a commercial banker, our primary responsibility is to provide products and services and credit to businesses of all size, small businesses up to the very largest companies in the United States, with Fortune 500 companies. We do a lot of business with companies on the East Coast, West Coast, and we're doing it right out of here, out of the Midwest, out of Kansas City and St. Louis, primarily because of this payment system that I was talking about, where we help people speed up the collection of their money and help them pay their vendors. We do that both domestically and internationally. And so my passion is working on products and services, and I work on incentive plans that we use to pay our commercial bankers, marketing that we use to market within the different markets to service commercial businesses. A lot of times I'll meet somebody, they don't know who I am, they'll say, well, what branch do you work at? Because everybody thinks a bank is really a series of branches, retail branches, and that's not what I do. Our bank does both, but that's really not what our training program is about or what I'm here to talk about. So I am actually, and here's the unlikely success story. So if you look at the top 5 people in our company, as a public company, some of you probably did that, you'll see that there's one graduated from Harvard, one from Yale, one from Stanford, one from SLU, and one from Graceland College. And no, that isn't where Elvis went. But so I grew up in a small town in southern Iowa with about 2,500 people. Grew up with a family where neither one of my parents went to college. Neither one really cared if I went to college or not. They raised me and my brothers and sisters to earn that there was no free lunch. So early on, from the time I was like 8 years old, they, and this is going to come back to banking, by the way. So from early on, from the time I was 8 years old, they never gave me money. Never, ever, ever gave me money. I had to buy my first bicycle. I had to buy my first basketball. I had to do everything. but they would always help facilitate us earning money, right? So early on, when I was 8 years old, father plowed up, big part of my yard, and I got to plant 50 tomato plants. I go sell tomatoes to the local stores and fruit stands, stuff like that. And over the course of several years, created several businesses. Anyway, got ready to go to college and didn't really know what I wanted to do. Knew I wanted to be in business, and didn't get a lot of direction from my family, but I was always asking people. I'd see successful people. I always had these jobs. I'd stop people and ask them, well, tell me what you do, how you do it, what you did it, or how you did it. And that's when I started to learn about this thing called banking, and attended this seminar where the bankers started talking about this learning curve, right? The learning curve, and relating the learning curve to profitability and making money. So that's when I decided I'd start looking for a banking job. Went to this small college, Graceland College, found a guy there, one of my professors who taught an investment class. He actually introduced me to a banker in Kansas City that had a small bank that sounded like it was doing very well, it was growing. And anyway, he sent a note down to them, which I later saw the note, and introduced me to the bank. So I went down. My first job right out of college was as a repo guy in the inner city of Kansas City. I see some old friends here, they didn't know that about me. But so my first job was actually primarily going out and cleaning up collateral from contractors, repo and backhoes and dump trucks and stuff like that, all in the inner city of Kansas City. Showed up the first day I worked from college, and there's a lady sitting on the step, and this is sort of sad, but sitting on the step eating cat food, right? And I realized this is not Iowa anymore. But I didn't know any better. I thought, okay, I could do this. I grew up in a small town. Learned you could do just about anything. And so that's how I started my career, was cleaning up bad loans, and then eventually started doing some small business lending and started making some SBA loans. And someone said, hey, you need to get out of here, because a mentor of mine said, you need to get out of here because things aren't going really well at this bank. And he introduced me to Commerce Bank, and I learned about this thing called a training program. So I got out of that bank, and I went into the Commerce Bank training program and realized that there's this whole other level of sophistication in banks other than collecting bad loans. Got into the training program, walked in the first day, so almost still fresh right off the farm in my 110% polyester suit, right? And walk in this big line of guys in there, and I recognize all the names on the desk, because all these names I recognize, last names of people that I've seen in the Kansas City Business Journal, families that own businesses in Kansas City, right? And I also noticed, wow, their suits are a lot nicer than mine too. and anyway, I thought this is a different world. And quickly, as soon as they figured out the difference between me and some of those folks, and literally where I went to school, I sort of got in with an introduction from a friend that introduced me to the management there. They had a problem. They had a bank out in Grandview, Missouri, that had a bank robbery, been a shootout in the parking lot. Nobody wanted to go out there and work, right? And so they took me out of the training program early, and they said, well, you're from Iowa, you'll do anything. So they sent me out to be the assistant branch manager of this bank. The guy before me, his name was Doug, he actually crawled to the door and locked the door after the robbers got outside. Robbers started to come back in, and there was a shootout in the parking lot. But I thought, I don't want to be here. I remember crying when they told me I was going there. I literally cried. I don't want to do this. I want to be a commercial banker. I want to be in the city. This was out in the suburbs. I want to be in the city. I want to be making big loans. So I realized, though, the quickest way out of here is to do a good job. So, and to create ways to make this branch grow like I'd never grown before. So I just found out this thing called residential construction loans, and I started making residential construction loans. Before you knew it, like the next 8 months in a row, this branch was the fastest growing branch in our city. At the time, we probably had 35 branches, because I was trying to get myself the heck out of this town, out of this community. And it wasn't long after that, about a couple of it's probably 12 months later, I got a call, and they said, hey, our bank can't have banks on the Kansas side of the state line. The state line cuts Kansas City apart, but we want to go into Kansas and develop business customers. We'd like you to come and be at that location at 89th and State Line and start developing business in Kansas. And I thought, well, I really like it here. We're doing well. And they said, no, we want you to go do this. So went and did that, and after a couple of months of doing that, actually it was probably like 9 months, we started generating a lot of business in Kansas, even though we didn't have banks there. A couple months after that process, then our chairman came to meet me and said, hey, we've had some people leave downtown, which is where I originally wanted to be, and we want you to come downtown and be in the agribusiness department. You're from Iowa, you ought to know what corn and soybeans are. And so I said, well, no, I really like what I'm doing here at the state line. I have some success. I didn't tell him this, but my house is about 5 minutes away. I could go home and have lunch with my wife once in a while, and life was good. But he said, no, we're going to come downtown. So anyway, brought me downtown to the agribusiness department, and I started dealing with grain traders and grain companies. Our bank had a lot of history of that, not with farmers, but with commercial ag businesses. And I quickly realized that it was pretty sleepy, right? Everybody was having a good time. There were 3 people there. We had about $35 million in loans and had for a long, long time. But I got impatient with that and said, we need to be doing more. So I started doing more outbound calling. Pretty soon we started, with me and a lot of other people help, we started growing that. And then after a couple of years of doing that, sort of got restless and said, geez, I'm calling these grain companies in Iowa too, and around the region. Could we also start calling on corporate customers, corporate prospects? Because our bank didn't have any customers in some of those states then in Northwest Arkansas or Iowa. They said, sure, go ahead, do that. It can't hurt anything. So with a lot of help from some other folks that I worked with, we started developing business with commercial customers in Iowa and in Northwest Arkansas, and started generating some pretty good growth there. Before long, then our chairman tapped on my door one day and said, hey, we want you to take on more. We want you to take on this regional banking role and do more than just ag. So I started doing the regional calling. We developed a real systematic calling program and really a systematic sales process, really value-added approach that before long, a few years after that, with the help of some very good people, we actually had more commercial loans in this regional group than we had in Kansas City. And we'd been in Kansas City for, at that time, about 120 years. And again, it wasn't all about me, it was about the group of people I was working with. They said, hey, we'd like you to come and manage commercial banking now for all of Kansas City, and we want you to employ some of these systematic calling processes in Kansas City. So we did that and started working with the Metro group, Metro Kansas City. Actually, the person that I was reporting to at the time, they said, well, he's going to start reporting to you. That actually happened twice in my career because things were changing in banking, and some of the people had been there for a while weren't really changing with it. And but as I started adding again more of a proactive sales approach, that created more opportunities. And then before long, a few years after that, we had a lot of success there. Again, because of the team we had more than anything, was asked to become head of commercial line of business for our company. And start trying to do some of these things and really not influence, not tell everybody what to do, but influence some of the other markets to try to take this systematic calling approach into the company. And we've since done that to the point where we're not just having a systematic calling approach in the markets we have, but now we're opening up offices in Nashville and again in Dallas and in these other states, Colorado, Oklahoma, to really take our super community bank strategy into those markets. And so that's sort of how I ended up where I am. And when I think about that, and I keep this list, and I've been doing it for 20 years of career enhancers. I have 4 things: career enhancers, career derailers, what good leaders do, and then just overall good leadership traits. And I'm just going to talk about career enhancers right now. And the first one is the willingness to take on a tough job. So again, coming from Graceland College, small town Iowa, I didn't have an MU MBA or an MU degree with me. I had to be willing to take on tough jobs. And looking back, had I not taken that job of being a repo guy and working out bad loans, I never would have ended up with the opportunity I have now. I had to agree that I was going to sort of step down maybe below where I thought I should start, but I was going to work my way out quickly to try to do better. It also happened when I went to Grandview, right? I didn't really want to do that. Heck, I cried because I was going to have to go to Grandview, but I thought, okay, I'm going to make the best out of this. I could have quit, I could have gone down the street, I could have done something else, but I said, no, I'm going to work my way out of it. And so I took on the tough job, and what I did in doing that is all of a sudden our chairman, who didn't know who I was, once he saw this little branch out there that was making money that hadn't made money before, in fact, nobody wanted to go to work there, all of a sudden it was one of the top performing branches. It really increased my visibility. And all of a sudden, our chairman then was Mr. Kemper. He said, I want to keep an eye on this guy, right? So I took on a tough job, got more visibility. Early exposure, get early exposure and visibility. I think that's important. I had lunch today with some of the graduate students, and then met with a smaller group here earlier today, and we talked a lot about different size companies and where to go and different markets where you should go look for a job. And I'll just give you my perspective. So having early exposure and early visibility, had I gone to work for a large national, international bank and maybe been at a branch that was 5, 6, 7, 10 layers below where the decisions are made, I wouldn't have had that visibility. My resume wouldn't have stood out on any, if anybody's looking at my bio, 10 layers up, levels up, and said, well, gosh, who should we promote to run this next office? My bio saying Graceland College, Rockhurst, would not have made me stand out. The only way I could stand out was get a chance where I got in an organization where I was close enough to the center of power where decisions were made that they were going to see what I was doing. So that was very important to me. And then the other thing that was very important in terms of that early exposure and visibility, and I figured this out early on, is the best people to promote me within our company were our customers. And so the more I could do a good job for our customers and the more they talked about me to the people in senior management of our company, the more they saw me passionate about taking care of them and helping them, they became my biggest cheerleaders. And the next thing you know, our chairman's pulled me inside and said, well, so-and-so just says you're doing a great job, or this or that or the other. And that's because I was focused on taking care of them. Depth and function, product knowledge, and industry experience builds credibility and confidence. So I didn't really want to go back down to the ag department because I was having fun at State Line. I was going home for lunch and seeing my wife more often and having some success. But going back and taking that ag job allowed me to focus on an industry. A lot of people don't like to do that. They don't like to focus too much, but I focused on an industry that all of a sudden within a year, I was like the expert in the bank. Maybe 2 years, I was the expert in the bank in this industry. And it's not because I grew up in Iowa, but I didn't know that much about the industry, but I read like a sponge. I just started reading like crazy about that industry. And whenever I was calling companies that industry, I was just asking all the questions I could. And again, before long, not only had I built up this other credibility because of early exposure, but I was an expert on a subject which made me more valuable, made me worth more financially, it made me a little bit more indispensable because I was seen as that expert. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to do that in whatever industry you're in. But sometimes there's this, again, hesitancy when you're first starting out to want to specialize because you want to be really general. But it also, the other thing it did for me is it built my self-confidence because I was a subject matter expert earlier than if I'd been a generalist for a long period of time. Breadth of experience, grow it, fix it, start it up, operating through cycles. Don't be afraid to take some risks. And that's sort of with the regional expansion. Someone was asking me earlier, how did you get permission to do that? Well, I didn't totally ask permission to do that. I figured out the script in my job description. I had a little bit of leeway here where I could start calling up into Iowa a little bit or into northwest Arkansas and start bringing in some names that our bank wasn't familiar with. And so by not being afraid to fail, by really asking for a little bit of forgiveness more than asking for permission, because it was sort of hard to change and turn a culture that's 120 years old and 150 years old. To go do that was not really the most accepted thing to do. But by doing it, by taking a little risk and maybe making a few mistakes, again, it increased my visibility and my value to the company. Failure, work through perceived failures and then rebound from failure. Again, it's all part of taking risks. Haven't had a lot of huge failures, but certainly had my share of for a bank that doesn't have a lot of credit problems, working through some issues, maybe making some loans that didn't always go as I'd hoped, and maybe even taking some large charge-offs. But the thing was, it's like a good receiver in the NFL, right? I thought, okay, what could I do different? How could I change my past pattern, or what could I have done different? But then you forget, you drop that ball and you go on. And so I didn't get too down on myself. Global view, learn about different cultures. Again, I don't care if it's a bank or if it's a hospital system or whatever you're doing. I became a student of our industry, and I found out whenever we were talking about what's going on, if we had problems, if we had issues, if we had things we were trying to do, I would quickly be the one that said, well, you know, I've been studying this bank, that bank, or this bank, and here's their business model, and here's how they do it. And there aren't a lot of original ideas in most industries, but I wasn't afraid to copy good ideas, but bring those back to our bank. And pretty soon, our chairman's introduced me to people who said he does a good job of keeping his nose out of the competitors' tents. And you do that whether you're just competing with banks here in Columbia or whether you're competing with companies all over the country. Be a student of the industry, be a sponge, bring good ideas to the table. So part of this entrepreneurial spirit, I guess I was raised with as a kid, because out of necessity, because if I wanted to have anything nice, I had to go figure out a way to earn the money, was developing this entrepreneurial spirit and bringing good ideas to the table. And I was fortunate enough that I picked an organization that rewarded that and liked having new ideas. And I think that one of the good things right now about the economy, just about any industry that you guys are going to be looking at, is the rate of change in just about any industry in the country. The rate of change is greater than any time in history, and a lot of the things that are going to allow companies to survive and deal with that change is bringing new ideas, and that's what I would do. I would always be bringing in new ideas, different ways that we could generate more income, different ways that we could leverage our core competencies to generate additional income. A couple other personal things, and I know you guys are going to think, well, guys, yeah, this sounds good, but so what? Is I always had a personal board of directors, and everybody in here should have a personal board of directors. There were always 2 or 3 people that I had, and they weren't people that worked in our company. You find your mentors. Every opportunity I've had in my career, there's always been someone there that helped me find the right direction. You know, you have to make decisions. You go this way or go this way. But I always had this personal board. I still have a personal board. I have 2 or 3 people that I go to, and I bounce ideas off of them, and I talk to them about political issues, whatever, within our company, or just to get their feedback. And everybody needs that personal board. And usually those people for me have also helped me find opportunities even within my own profession that I wouldn't have known about had they not also been looking out for me. And then managing your brand. I've been talking to I have a son who's a senior in college at another school, and one is a freshman at the same school. And we've been talking a lot about managing the brand, and I think that starts early on. You guys probably get tired of this sermon, but I opened up my son's Facebook page the other day, and there he was holding a beer at a party. And it's called bad brand management, bad brand management, and it starts right now while you're in school, and then it really starts as soon as you walk in the door you sort of get a push restart, right? When you start your first job, you can create your own brand. And I would tell you, the brand I had when I was a senior in college at Graceland was a lot different than the brand that I walked into and started projecting my first day on the job. But you got to always be looking at how you manage that brand, how you're perceived, and always having enough empathy and reading people, having some perception of how you're received. And I'm sure I didn't always get that right. There's some people in here that I've worked with. They can probably tell me where I was off on my brand, but you can't underestimate the importance of managing that brand. Now, why banking? Why banking for me then, and why banking now? The learning curve thing, that is so important. So one of my best friends, the guy that for 2 or 3 years after I got out of college, whenever we go out on a Friday or Saturday night, he was always buying my beers because he was earning 3 or 4 times more than I was. Took that first job, got a lot of money. I took a job my first year out of college. I'm sounding like a dinosaur. I was making $1,000 a month gross, right? I had to get an apartment close to my house, because I couldn't afford to drive very far. But I kept thinking about that learning curve, and that's probably the best advice that I could ever give anybody, is when you're coming right out of school, when you're looking at that first opportunity, think about, okay, what's the value now, and what am I going to learn that's going to make me more valuable over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Am I going to get bored in 5 years? And you may get bored even if you go into an organization where you have a very steep learning curve. And you know, I've always found myself guilty of that. I need to change a little bit every 5 to 7 years. But focus on the learning curve. The thing that I've enjoyed the most and that keeps me passionate about the banking is exposure to different industries, exposure to different business models, and just not always dealing with the same thing every day with patient issues or HIPAA issues or regulatory issues. If I were going into healthcare, there's a guy here today I'm actually trying to recruit. He's focused on healthcare. But anyway, I'm just kidding. That's just a joke. But so I was telling the guys a little bit ago, different business models. We're dealing with a company, one of our customers. This guy created this industry. He sells more baseball bats than anybody else in the United States, right? How did he do it? You guys would all probably get this better than I did. He did it with search engine optimization, merchandising, marketing, and being a really, really good leader and a coach of people. One of the business models, the family we were talking about earlier, a husband and wife that I worked with, started, he worked for the USDA, she was a teacher. Probably between them, they never made more than $30,000 a year. They've noticed their dog had bad breath, so they started messing around in their kitchen, right, and creating these concoctions to try to sweeten up their dog's breath, and realized that the issue was the plaque, so they made this thing really, really, with special concoction, made it really, really sticky, so when they chewed on the dog bone and pulled the plaque off their teeth, refreshing their breath. They also put some stuff in there. Ended up becoming a company called Greenies. They ended up selling it for M&M Mars for a lot of money, 9 figures, a lot of money. We were driving over here today, and Brad, my associate, we were talking about companies, and there's a Love's Travel Stop billboard there. I've worked with, because of what I do and the type of companies I work with, I know Bill Love. I've worked with Bill Love. I've worked with his family. I've heard about his business model. I've heard his strategy of working down Interstate 35 and really taking advantage of the NAFTA corridor. And so working with all these different businesses just is very exhilarating. And it's also part of the learning curve. And then the other thing I think that was important to me, and why banking for me, and I think it still holds true today, is I like the idea of being sort of a respected advisor, right? I like the idea of being looked up to. Maybe it was growing up in a small town, I always remember the 3 biggest houses in the town were the attorney, the doctor, and for whatever reason, the pharmacist. And they were all really looked up to. Oh, the banker, I forgot about the banker. He was really looked up to. But we didn't bank with a local banker because my dad didn't want anybody in town knowing how much money he had, so we drove 25 miles to a different bank. But there's a lesson there too. But I like the idea of being respected, and even now I get calls from people that are, believe it or not, 15 years older than me, that have created major companies that sort of the names are well known nationally, that they call and they want to talk to me, they want advice, believe it or not, and I like that. I like being a part of that. But why now? Why is banking a good place to be now? There's this big talent gap in banking. In fact, in other industries too, the baby boomers are working their way through the system, right? And even within our own company, about 60% of our senior management team is going to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. A big chunk of them is going to retire in the next 3 years. And there's going to be a lot of turnover. And you could say the same thing probably for healthcare or other industries. But you guys that are going to be graduating in the next year to 5 years, it's a very, very, very good time to be getting out of college if you focus on the right industry, if you focus well, and make sure banking is one that's always going to be a local industry. You're not going to have some bankers in China banking the local businesses in Columbia or the businesses in St. Louis or Kansas City. It's always going to be regional or local depending on the size of the company, maybe national if the companies are big enough. So it's a good place to be for that reason. And then the other thing is that there's this void in banking right now because it's part of consolidation and a lot of banks consolidating their credit, their decisioning. They eliminated their training programs over the last 15 years. So a lot of the nation's biggest banks, a lot of the regional banks don't have training programs anymore. And it's a very, very specialized thing that we do, learning how to assess risk and just the critical thinking skills that you learn. And because of that, and I go to some national conferences. I sit I was just at one with the 30 of the top 40 banks in the United States. And you go around the room, and these are the heads of all these banks. They're all saying the same thing. We wish we hadn't eliminated our training programs, but we thought we were cutting expenses over the last 20 years. So there's a void there because of the lack of people trained. And then I guess the other thing in terms of why banking, why now, and especially for a bank like ours, is the whole thing again about not being able to outsource overseas banking, regional banks in particular. There's a young man in here who's actually an analyst. He's working part-time now, an analyst for a shelter. And he got this. Regional banks are really, really in favor because of the people realizing that the national banks maybe have gotten a little bit too big and can't stay as close to the customer. So with the growth in regional banks like ours that are growing regionally, but you're still able to stay close to the center of power, the center of decision making, and grow as those banks grow regionally, where there's going to be a lot more pressure. If you're already a great big bank, it's going to be much more difficult to grow those organizations. So anyway, that's my story. That's why I think banking is a good place to be. The other thing I would say is because of that talent void and because of the pressure for banks to generate earnings is they pay a lot better than they did when I started. And I see some of my associates up here, banks pay a lot better now. About 80% of the employees in our bank are incented in some way, right? So it's not just sit behind the desk, but even our tellers are incented to add value to the relationships, to find ways to help our customers. So financially, it's a much better place to be too. So Dean, with that, that's my story, or maybe more of it than you care to hear. I'd be happy to answer any questions or stay and talk to anybody about their careers or our bank.
Okay, thank you. So questions, we'll hold the applause till the end of the Q&A. How about that? I know you all want to talk, but no. If you have a question, raise your hand, and we'll run a microphone to you.
Sure. Go ahead.
So my name is Tim Cunningham, and this is, I guess, a really specific question. So you'd mentioned learning about your industry from your customers, which I think is really a really neat idea. You mentioned kind of calling out people and learning more about the industry. So how would you go about, like, you were just asking questions, or just call them out of the blue, or like how does that work out?
So very good question. So we use a training program. So our trainees, they start out in our credit department, and this credit department is receiving financial statements in from thousands of companies around the country every day, right? And our analysts, they first start out by learning to look at really trends within those financial statements. And hold on, it's not all about financials, but on the balance sheet and the income statement, and they look for trends and what's going on. And then they learn by looking at those trends. Well, you got to ask questions to understand what's happening with those trends. They then work with our very experienced commercial bankers, and they'll go out on calls. And an analyst in our bank might go out on calls on companies in 6 different industries in a week, right? And they're learning how to ask those critical open-ended questions. They're not asking them themselves. They may spend 6 months or a year hearing other people ask them, but the really good ones, they learn to take initiative. And when they're out on those calls, if they have a question, they go ahead and ask it too. And the banker's going, wow, this person's got something going on here. When we have another opening, we ought to be recruiting them. But you learn by working with more experienced people and a process that really funnels a lot of that information through our training department. Does that answer your question? Yeah. You had a question?
Hi, my name is Carolyn Hager, and I was wondering what are some of the specific qualities that you're looking for in students who are just coming out of undergrad, getting their undergrad degree?
Very, very good question. So a lot of common sense, right? Well-rounded academically and in terms of other activities. Someone who's really curious about how someone makes or lose money. If you're really curious, you don't have to have had the top score in accounting or finance or econ. If you're just a curious person, And then if you have good people skills, if you enjoy working with people, and you go show a curiosity in their business, and so it's really empathy. Do you have a lot of empathy? And if you go do that, and if you genuinely are interested in what makes their business work or what makes their business not work, and you capture that information and you learn from it, one, the customers or the prospects are going to like you, and two, it's going to sell well, it's going to communicate well within the organization, and you're going to have a very, very bright future. Anybody else? Yes?
Hi, I'm Nick Garden, and I was just wondering, what do you believe is the main reason why Commerce Bank has been able to outperform other banks, peers, and bigger banks in the United States?
Very good question. And I've over the course of the last several weeks, I've met with small groups of our people, 30 people at a time from different parts of our company, sort of talking about some things that have creeped into our culture that we want to take out of the culture. The need to sort of reshaping our culture just a little bit, with some very common themes of be here now, not bringing the cell phones, the iPads and all that to our meetings, and there are a lot of other things that I could go into, but anyway, and here I'll tell you, I talked to them about this very same thing. Our biggest asset goes home every night. It's not our buildings, it's not our collateral, it's the people. The people make all the difference in the world. It's the people that help develop the relationships, that help bring customers to us. It's the people we have, some very, very, very bright, talented technical people that make sure that we have as good or better products and services as the largest banks in the country. It's the people. And this idea that, I don't care what industry you're in, let's say any industry, and the idea that because you're bigger, you have smarter, better people, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way at all. We make sure that we find people that really enjoy working in sort of a team, almost family environment, and that are very, very intelligent, and that like to bring new ideas, and again, work together to help better the organization, and that's the key. We also have, we've had the benefit of continuity and leadership in our company because of this one family that I mentioned, the Kemper family, that's really provided us good, sound guidance for many, many, many years. So we don't chase fads. We don't go out and just try to, chase the quickest fad. But well, gosh, everybody's going to Florida, and that's where the fish are, quote, fish are. So we ought to be making a lot of loans in Florida. We don't do that. We sort of stick to what we know. And even our growth now regionally, it's very deliberate. It's very calculated. It's very measured. And we're growing incrementally. And we don't just go out and feel like we have to do things in big lumps and take huge risks that maybe we don't understand. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, my name is James Jordan, and I recently watched former Labor Secretary Robert Reich's documentary, Inequality for All, and he was talking about income inequality, and he didn't really offer any solutions other than changing the tax code. And I was wondering if, as a banker, you're seeing an impact on that inequality in your customers, if it's having any effect on them, and what banks can or are doing to fix it.
So inequality in what way, again? Income inequality. So some of that is, there are different regulations that encourage banks to make sure that they are making money available and treating people fairly within the markets. We think one of the biggest things that we do as a bank, and that we did through the economic cycles, is that we help educate our customers on if they can or can't afford something, right? And now there's a lot of new regulations coming out to make sure that bankers don't lend people more money than they should borrow. So our bankers, and we still have bankers in our branches that spend a lot of time helping educate our customers on how much they can afford, on helping them budget. We have a lot of small business bankers. We have a whole group that helps them with business plans and helping them finance their small businesses to help them be successful, to help them create jobs for other people. So we feel like that's one of the best ways that we can deal with income inequality, is help people understand what they can and can't afford, but also help people create jobs. That's one of the things I'm most proud of, actually, when I deal with our customers, is I love, my kids and I are driving around town, I like pointing to a building and say, see that building's going up? We finance them. We're not just the building, but often we finance the company. We provide them operating capital. We're helping create jobs. So that's what we think our best, the best way that we can help tackle that issue. Any other questions? Yes?
So you talked about kind of going out on a limb early in your career and affecting some changes at Commerce, and you felt some resistance to that because the culture was kind of entrenched after, you said, 120 years. How did you go about generating buy-in for your changes? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So for me personally, I got some of the buy-in by earning some credibility by cleaning up some messes early on and helping clean up some problems and taking on some roles that I didn't necessarily volunteer for, but I didn't run from either. So I earned credibility by doing that and doing a good job with things that have been given to me. That then, when I started stretching, I wanted to do a few other things outside the box. There weren't a lot of expectations from my superiors about the value of that. But by building up that goodwill and that credibility, okay, well, let's go ahead and let him play with this, because can't do much harm, right? And so by always building that credibility, by being careful about my brand, hopefully, then I was given a little bit freer rein. And certainly I think that's been the case 6 years ago when I was really pushing us to do some acquisitions in other regions. Our chairman was quick to buy in, and I think he saw that I was very careful with the shareholders' money, and said, "Okay, well, let's try it, go in baby steps, incremental steps." So go ahead and do that, and I built up that credibility, so he knew that I wasn't going to be putting too much at risk too soon. Yes.
You mentioned how much time and effort you put into finding and attracting new people, especially new graduates. How do you get them to stay, or how do you get people to want to make their whole career with Commerce Bank?
Yeah, so our turnover for commercial bankers, it varies by market. The markets that I'm most familiar with, our turnover is less than about 10%, and we do it a number of ways. There are more formal ways and different things that we're doing. We do a lot of employee surveys now. We measure employee engagement. We ask our employees to tell us how they're feeling about the bank. If they feel empowered, would they recommend a friend go to work for us? We try to get their opinions, but then you got to really listen to that too and try to act on it. We're doing a lot more. We're doing a much better job than we did even 5 years ago. We're doing a lot of formal succession management planning. So literally for every management position within the company, we'll have a management succession plan 3 to 5 deep. And so that helps us plan for loss of people, for retirement, for other reasons, but also those people that are in that management succession plan, it shows that they have a career path with us, right? And shows that we are thinking about them and willing to invest in them, and not just in a job, but investing in their careers. With the trainees, with the people that just join us, which is something that I'm very, very, very interested in, because if the bank not had a training program for me, I don't know, I might be working in a feedlot in Iowa or something, but nothing wrong with Iowa, I love Iowa. But I personally get involved. I have breakfast every few months with our trainees, spend time with them. We have opportunities to go learn, to go on different calls to do things. I grab them and say, hey, come on, let's go do this. We get them involved down in special projects. We have a leadership development program. We have 2 different types of leadership development programs for the people that really earn some credibility early on and show that they're really focused on career growth. We have very formal development programs that we put them into even after they get out of the training program, and they're usually available to be nominated for those programs as much as maybe 24 months after the training program, 2 years, 3 years after the training program. All the trainees have a mentor, so they have a mentor, and it's usually someone that's maybe 5 years ahead of them that was in the training program, 5 years before them, that's sort of made their way through and the program, and now they're out doing something more directly involved with customers. So each trainee has a mentor to work with them like that. So, and I could go on and on. There's a number of different things that we do to try to keep investing, right? Because we all want to know somebody cares about us. And we don't just shove them over and say, oh, go over here and spread financial statements. We just keep investing and keep showing them opportunities for growth. Anybody else? Great, thank you. I know I've talked a lot.
Okay, before everyone departs, just very quickly, I want to thank the Vaughn family for supporting the Executive in Residence Lecture, the staff in my office, our Photography with Recess Inc., and the Academic Support Center that does all of the recording. But most importantly, of course, we want to thank Mr. Barth. So if we could please present you with this plaque in honor of Vaughn. So that we'll look this way. I'm really glad.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Have a nice day. And Mr. Barth is offered to stay for those of you interested in continuing the conversation.